Hello, Pod Smashers of the Internet, and welcome to another episode of
Pod Smash.
Where Gaming Goes to Grab a Beer. We are a weekly video game podcast smashing together ideas that you care about with video games.
That's right, and we are your hosts, Penguin and Termite. I am Penguin.
I am Termite. And I realized I did that out of order. That's okay.
It's okay. Tonight we're going to be talking about, we're going to get positive. It's common, I think, in just the general culture to kind of talk about, like, debate whether or not video games have, like, a negative impact on society or negative impact on individuals. And we're going to do the opposite today. And we're actually going to, like, focus on some stories where video games have made an actual positive impact in the world. And not just in, like, the mental well-being, not just in sort of in defense of video games, but, like, actual stories and actual, like, organizations that are centered around video games that have, like, genuinely helped people and genuinely made things better, made the lives of others, or made the world a better place. So that's what we're going to be focusing on. We'll dive in a little bit, but we are where gaming goes to grab a beer. So what are you drinking tonight?
I'm actually not drinking alcohol. I was trying to purge a little bit after a week-long vacation where I drank more than I usually would every single night for the week. So this week I am taking a pause on alcohol, and I'm actually drinking tea, but it's kind of fun. So I figure I'd still read about it and talk about it. I'm drinking a Tazo tea, or Tazo, I don't know how to pronounce it, but I've always heard it called Tazo, a sweet cinnamon spice. It's caffeine-free because it's late, and I don't want to stay up all night. So I cozy up with an herbal infusion of warm, sweet cinnamon and spicy star anise. And it is fall in a cup. That's pretty much what this tastes like. It's amazing.
I do like tea. I prefer coffee, and so usually most mornings I only have, enough, like, hot beverage. My hot beverage is coffee, and I drink it. Like, I don't usually want hot beverages, like, later than the morning.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'll have another cup of coffee depending how the day is. But for the most part, it's just like my hot beverage time is in the morning. And if I don't drink tea then I'm not going to drink tea. Although I do drink tea when I'm sick. But I do love a good cup of tea. It's just
what are you drinking?
I'm just drinking my other wood booger. So for those who have not heard me talk about this beer, I got a 6-pack like 2 podcasts ago and have talked about it for the last 2 podcasts. So this is a plug. Go listen to those episodes. One was on mythology and the other was on the Xbox One. So in either of those episodes, you can hear me talk more about this beer that I am drinking, that I have 3 more left. Hopefully I won't be drinking only that for the next 3 episodes.
I have so much pumpkin in my fridge that I will probably be doing that for
it's funny because you've had the pumpkin ale multiple times, and we've had the pumpkin ale together multiple times. And I think every single time you try to say that beer's name, you always have to say it twice because you say pumpkin.
Pumpkin. No, it's pumpkin. Pumpkin.
All right. Cool. Well, I assume you want to talk since we're on a hiatus for our news show. If you missed last episode, we announced that we are on hiatus from our Twitch and streaming activities. So if you have been wondering where we've been on Twitch and stuff like that, that's why. We are going to hopefully pick up and ramp things back up in December after Termite has sort of settled into his new home. And hopefully my daughter has had some time to develop as well and maybe stabilize the sleeping situation. Of course, that's going to be a toss-up. Anyways, but since we can't really talk about a news episode, if we can keep it tight and keep it short, I'm assuming you want to talk a little bit about the Nintendo Direct today.
Yeah, and actually, you mentioned the hiatus and like the news show, and really quickly, we started the news show at the height of the pandemic when we were all working from home and we had a lot of extra time, and there was so much news coming out every single week because all of the big events in the gaming industry were all canceled, at least the in-person presence, meaning we had like the Summer of Gaming from Jeff Keighley, and then IGN had its own thing, and basically all of the E3 and Gamescom present stuff in the fall was all spread across the entire summer and fall. And it was so much to cover, and we wanted to talk about it. It was eating into our shows every week. Now that we're taking this hiatus, the only reason why I want to talk about this Nintendo Direct in September, because it is a Gamescom level beat in like drum beat in the gaming industry. And so we're not going to have gaming news in every single episode between now and December. We're only talking about this because it is a big deal. It's a big Nintendo Direct, and we don't have the news show with which we would cover it. So here we are. That's exactly the caveat.
So, yep, exactly.
So,
so
running through
for those who hate us covering news on this show, don't worry. This is a one-time thing for now. Unless something else drops in the next.
Right. If PlayStation decides to do a state of play or Microsoft does some big thing, we'll probably cover those, but only the big stuff. Like, we're not going to do the weekly churn. So.
Sure. I mean, there's going to be a Smash thing too, and isn't there going to be another Direct in a couple of months too? Didn't they say
for
that?
Animal Crossing? Yeah.
Oh, word. Okay, cool. Yep. Awesome.
We'll talk about that too. All right, so Nintendo's latest Direct has arrived and brought with it some big updates, alongside announcing the Nintendo Switch Online and expansion pack membership that will add N64 and Sega Genesis games.
Woo-woo!
Nintendo
Sega
also
Genesis.
unveiled, I know, it's so
Whoosies.
excited, unveiled Kirby and the Forgotten Land, the first gameplay trailer for Bayonetta 3, and some new
Mm.
Splatoon 3 gameplay, and some more. So going through the highlights here, for me now, that was just reading a little blurb, the summary of what
Sure,
was
yeah.
announced. But so Kirby and the Forgotten Land, what did you think of this?
I didn't really get to watch the trailer. I saw enough of it to be like, that looks cool because it's 3D, right? Like it's kind of like Kirby, like you can go anywhere. Or is it?
It's open world, yeah.
That's
Like
what I
it
was gonna
shows
say,
them
yeah.
exploring a big world. It is like that camera angle you get from like Mario Odyssey or Breath of
That's
the
great.
Wild.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I want for not. It doesn't necessarily have to be all Nintendo games, but I do think that Nintendo should really begin to look at their roster and say, how can we? This is in vogue right now. Now, granted, they don't all have to be open world games, but I do think that Kirby is a great fit for that, right? And like
Mhm.
a kind of big open world collectathon, story adventure, power sucking awesomeness. Like that sounds like just like what Kirby needs, a shot in the arm that Kirby needs. So,
Mhm.
do you know if Sakurai is involved? Did they say if Sakurai was involved in that, or do you have any
No,
idea?
I don't think so.
Because he was, I think he maybe invented Kirby, or was like at least heavily involved in Kirby's
He
development.
worked for HAL
Okay.
Laboratories that made the first
Uh-huh.
Smash Bros. And Kirby came out of HAL, so I think being part of the same development studio that he was probably involved. But I don't
Yeah,
think because I know Iwata, the late Iwata, was also I think the actual creator of
the
Kirby.
creator, right? Yeah, I
Yeah.
didn't think he was the creator, but I knew that like Kirby had a huge role in the latest Smash Bros. Game, and he
Mhm.
had a special place in Sakurai's heart. So,
Yeah, like and Kirby kind of to me was reduced to like this super over the top kiddie cheesy games where like the games were super super easy and they were very shallow and they
yeah,
lacked any sort of like gameplay depth. They were just this rinse and repeat kind of beat that they've had. Nintendo has released through the 3DS and the early Switch times. I haven't really been excited about a Kirby game. I even missed the GameCube ones because they were like the racing star game, which I heard was actually really
right.
good. Air Ride, Kirby's Air Ride, and there were some Game Boy Advance titles that were really good. But really, like it hasn't been since Kirby's Superstar on the Super Nintendo where I've really cared about Kirby until now. Like this looks really, really good, and there was gameplay in that trailer. It wasn't just a teaser; it was actually
Sure,
showing
yeah.
Kirby doing the copy ability and
The
some of the cutter
N64 Kirby
stuff.
was
And
really good too, but
yeah, it was. It was. Yep.
hey, real quick,
Yeah.
Masahiro Sakurai is a Japanese video game director, designer, and songwriter, best known as the creator of Kirby and Smash Bros. Series.
Oh, well, there you go. I stand corrected. Thank
Also,
you
did
for
you
looking
know
that up.
Kirby was named after Jack Kirby?
Jack Kirby. Who's that?
He was Stan Lee's partner. I believe Stan Lee was the writer and he was the artist
Oh,
for
for
Marvel
Marvel
Comics.
stuff?
Yep.
Huh. I didn't know
Mhm.
that.
I think so.
Neat.
I could be completely making that up right now, but I feel like I heard that at some point. So maybe that's like a what do you call it, urban legend? But all right. Sorry, enough Kirby trivia. Do you want to talk about what else you want to talk about with this
Yeah,
direct?
so
Because
the
I
Nintendo
think that
Switch
looks great. Yeah,
Online.
I'm into it.
Nintendo Switch Online. The legend
Yes.
happened. The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time intro was used to announce that the N64 library is now coming to the Nintendo Switch Online
Woo!
via an expansion pack. And alongside of that, we're also getting Sega Genesis games. So I was really excited. What Sega Genesis was announced afterwards, but as the N64 montage was happening, it was Ocarina of Time, Super Mario 64, Star Fox 64, and then they showed Win Back, which that's an odd choice. Mario Kart 64, and then Mario Tennis. Yoshi's Story and Dr. Mario 64 are the lineup, and Sin and Punishment is the last one, which is a Japanese N64 game that I missed when it came out. But yeah, so that's the lineup. N64 titles are here with an announcement that more are coming in the future, and they confirmed Banjo-Kazooie, Pokemon Snap, Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, Kirby 64, which you just mentioned, Mario Golf, Paper Mario, and F-Zero X. Fantastic! Like that is an
That's
amazing
great.
lineup of
Yeah,
N64
that's
games.
great. Did
And
they?
Banjo Kazooie coming from Microsoft, like Rare just
Yeah.
tweeted right before our show went live, like, "Yay, we're so happy to bring our Bear and Bird combo like back to Nintendo platforms where it all kind of began." And I was like, "Wow, this
Yeah,
is so cool!" Like,
that's really cool.
yeah,
Well, now I'm wondering, do you think that they're gonna go the next step and do GameCube as well? Like, I mean,
they're
as
moving
much
in
as
that
it like
direction, right?
as much as it's like weird to me that GameCube is technically like a retro console,
Yeah.
that I mean, yeah, it fits in there, so like throw them in there.
Yeah,
Um,
it's well if they port Wind Waker from the HD Wii U version to the Switch, and they've got Mario Sunshine, they're starting to enter into the like we've already remastered territory
sure, yeah.
where these
I mean,
N64
technically they've
titles have
already
never been.
remastered Ocarina, so
Yeah, they did that on the 3DS, so
yeah,
it's kind of
exactly.
trapped on a different ecosystem.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, I mean, if we're talking about things trapped in ecosystems, then Nintendo, has a lot that they need to
Yeah, they really do.
liberate from stuff like that. So
Mm-hmm.
cool.
And then Sega Genesis games. I'll just run through these real quick. I'm excited about this because there's a couple of highlights. Sonic the Hedgehog 2, Streets of Rage 2 is awesome, especially co-op, couch co-op. Echo the Dolphin, Castlevania Bloodlines. That's awesome. That's a really expensive game to find, by the way, if you can get it physically. Contra Hardcore, which was a very hard to find limited release of Contra. Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine, Golden Axe, of course, it's a classic. Gunstar Heroes, again, super expensive, hard to find Sega game. It's really, 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 really good. Musha, I don't know what that is. Fantasy Star 4, Ristar, which I adored as a child. Shining Force, Shinobi 3, Return of the Ninja Master, which was my favorite Shinobi game, and Strider. So a good mix of like RPGs and platformers and action adventure games and beat 'em ups and a puzzle game, Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine. So a whole bunch of cool mix of Sega Genesis games that highlight that system. What a selection. Like, what a surprise. I didn't expect Sega to be there at all. There was a lot of rumors about the N64 games, but wow. That was really, really cool. So, Bayonetta 3 gameplay?
Yeah.
You want to talk about that?
I do. This should be the last thing we talk about, even if there's other stuff that we could cover, but we're running out of time. So I'll be quick and just say, looks awesome. I mean, I guessed Bayonetta as soon as I saw so they showed a trailer and it was super serious, but it said Platinum Games, and there were a bunch of like Japanese soldiers fighting these giant glowing monster-y looking. They were clearly monsters, but the design was enough that I was like, they look like they could potentially be angelic, which is again would be indicative that it's Bayonetta because she fights angels. I also knew that, again, this is Nintendo and this is also Platinum, so like what would Platinum be announcing here that they wouldn't announce at like the PlayStation Showcase or whatever other number of announcement things. So I was guessing Bayonetta, and then there was a moment where like the big monster was about to smash the soldiers, and then you see like a salvo of some kind of projectile fire, and it was purple, and I was like, that's Bayonetta. But they turned around and it was a little dog holding a finger, like holding a gun, like a little dog mascot holding a finger, and I was like, that's from Astral Chain. What?
Oh, is it really?
Yeah, there's like
neat.
a character that dresses up like that in Astral Chain, so I was wondering what the heck that was, but then Bayonetta comes and blasts, and then, it's Bayonetta. So it's really cool. I mean, it looks a lot like a Bayonetta game, right? Like it's got that kind of very Devil May Cry stylish hack and slash combo, very Platinum Games, very cool. The new kind of mechanical twist, I think, that they look like they're throwing out there is they've made this so in the first two games, she could summon these demons or whatever using portals that she created with her hair, because it's that kind of awesome type of game.
Yeah.
And so but they were always like summons, right? Like it was always like a bit like a cutscene or whatever to blast the enemies and they're gone. Now it looks like they're fully controllable, and there's going to be sections of the game where you're basically summoning your demons and having them fight like kaiju against other kaiju. So there's sort of a kaiju mechanic that I don't think we've really seen in a lot of hack and slash games before. So should be really, really interesting. Her design is another thing I wanted to hit on real quick.
Mm-hmm.
They had mentioned that they were going to be toning back her proportions.
Yeah.
If that makes sense, because in the previous games she was kind of over, hyper proportionate in certain areas. And I think they have successfully done that, and her outfit looks a little bit more like a Japanese idol than like a dominatrix or whatever, like in the previous games. So a little bit more toned down in the sexuality, but she's still very much that too.
Oh yeah.
But also, but she does. It's just kind of funny because when she summons the demons, she does these little dances that look very much like the K-pop Japanese idol kind of dancing, which is just, it looks charming as heck. But and the last thing I'm going to hit on, and we can move on, is at the end of the trailer they showed the like logo or whatever, and they showed this blood moon, and then a character. They briefly they showed the date or the year that it's supposed to come out, 2022, and then a sword cuts through it, and there's a character who you only see the back of, but he/she, I suppose, has a katana, has short white hair, but looks very neat. It's important that I mention that. And that's kind of is wearing like spiky armor, but it looks very, very much like Virgil from Devil May Cry. And I say Virgil because of the neat hair. Dante has very like messy, mussy hair, so I do think it may be his twin who also wields a katana. So looks like there's some debate as to what this tease was, who this character is, if it's a new character, if it's the return of another character, or what, but and then there are people like me who think it might be a crossover with Devil May Cry, because again, the creator of Bayonetta, Hideki Kamiya, I think is his name, also made Devil May Cry. So yeah, could be a really cool little crossover if Capcom was playing
Yeah.
ball. So a little tease
Mm-hmm.
there. So
You've
definitely
wanted
they're
that for
building hype.
years. You've
So
always talked about that.
yeah, but I always thought it would happen in Smash, not in an actual
Right?
Bayonetta game. So I'm into it if it's happening in
Well, we do have
Bayonetta.
one more Smash Bros. Character coming.
Yep, exactly. That's what I'm wondering. Maybe they're teasing Dante for Smash in the Bayonetta trailer. I don't
Ooh.
know. There's so many possibilities. So, anyways, so that's that. That is the Nintendo Showcase. So sorry for going a little bit long. Do you want to move on to our next segment?
Yes, which is doing this podcast is our favorite thing. Doing this podcast is our favorite thing.
I didn't know if you wanted me to go. It
I
was so
gave you the
confusing.
chance, and then you didn't, and then I
Well, but
committed.
I didn't like, and then I did commit.
I
And
know, we
then
both did.
it was just bad. It was ugly. That was an ugly one.
We'll be okay.
Unlike that horrible intro, Favorite Things is a great segment where we like to share with you something that we're excited about, something that inspired us, something that we discovered or rediscovered, and that we made us feel something or experience something, and we are sharing it in hopes that you might go out and find your next favorite thing.
Yes, my favorite thing this week is actually a lunch date with my wife. And it's cool because there are very, very few times in our life where we can go out somewhere together without our children. And so we either have to plan ahead and like make a babysitter and it's a whole thing, or in this case, both of our kids were in daycare school respectively. And my wife was around out and about. And I was like, hey, let's meet for lunch. And I was able to get out of the office and run downtown to meet at Mason-Dixon Cafe, which is a restaurant here in Fredericksburg. That is one of my favorite restaurants in the area. And we had like this awesome just discussion and talk through and like quiet, peace, amazing lunch. It was a good date. So that's my favorite thing this week.
Nice. Gosh, my favorite thing. I went to, so I had to work a little bit late the other day on Tuesday, and I was kind of annoyed about it because it was Tuesday. My mom has been coming on Tuesdays to help out with the babies and kind of help smooth things over because my wife has to work Tuesday afternoons. In this case, my wife didn't have to work, so I took the opportunity to get some work done at our data center and kind of help out with a field engineer that was already scheduled to come out and work with one of my coworkers there. So I met up with my coworker before the field engineer got there, and I had to do some stuff. So I worked with him, and we did some kind of game planning stuff. And then we went to a restaurant, a Mexican restaurant that we frequent, and there we got pineapple margaritas that were just so good. So the Mexican food at this place, it's okay. And the food itself is like, it's okay. It's not like the best Mexican food in the world, but it's not the worst either. But their margaritas at this place, I don't know what they do, but they're always so good. So pineapple margarita, Frida's, if you're in the Richmond area, you should check it out. Pretty good place. So
You've talked about that before on the show, and you
I have.
wanted me to go with you to this place so we could get our own margaritas together, penguin and termite style.
Probably not gonna happen.
Why wouldn't it? You act like I'm moving across the country. Richmond is a 20-minute drive farther than it is now. It's not that big a deal.
All right. Well, cool. Then that's favorite things, which moves us to the segment we skipped last week, which is DLC. So
downloadable content.
It is downloadable content. It's a game. It's a gimmick. It's a mini discussion. It's a discussion you wouldn't normally have, maybe about video games. And so I'm actually going to. The more I thought about it, there was one that I was going to do last week, but I didn't commit to it. And we had already talked a lot about our favorite things, so I figured we'd skip it. But the more I thought about it, the more I was like, I do like this one. I like this prompt. So we're going to do the one that I was going to do last week.
Let's do it.
It's in honor of Kena Bridge of Spirits having released. I bought it. Haven't started it yet. I'm really close to my playthrough, my last playthrough of Dark Souls, getting the platinum. So I'm going to finish that for Dark Souls 3, just to be specific. But I do have Kena ready to go. It's next, and it should be in comparison, it should be a pretty quick, brisk platinum to knock out. But it's been getting really good reviews. Been doing really well.
Yep.
And in honor of Ember Lab, who created it, for some context, they are a brand new studio. And I'm not just talking about brand new like game developers who have gotten together, veteran game developers who started a brand new studio. I'm talking about these guys did not get into the business to do video games. They were trying to do animation. They wanted to make animated videos. In fact, the very first video they made was that Majora's Mask thing. Remember that Majora's Mask thing? I think we talked about it on the podcast. Mm-hmm. And it was this. That's what they wanted to do. They wanted to make like animated video game movies, but they decided to make their own game, and so they made Kena. And so these guys are, yeah, they're animators, and I'm sure they hired programmers and developers and stuff like that who could make games, but like this is their first game that they've ever made, and it's maybe not like a smash hit, but it's a really well regarded game. So I wanted to, as our DLC prompt in honor of them, I wanted to talk about what do you think is another like group of professionals that if like based on their skill set and based on the things that they make, what do you think is another profession that would be really good at making video games? Like surprisingly good. Like their first video game would have the potential to be like as good or better than Kina based on their skill set. The trick is they can't be already making some kind of game. So like it can't just be like you can't be like, oh, board game designers would be really good at making video games. Yeah, of course they would if they had the like skill set or could hire people. Like of course they'd have a good like duh. But I'm talking about other industries that you think would like make a like have a good outlook or good experiences that would do really well in making games.
Well, I think it's a cop out answer, but it's easy. Cinematographers.
Oh yeah.
Like their cinematographers are kind of the unsung hero. There's occasionally an award. I think an Oscar does go to cinematography, but like no one really talks about how when a movie comes out, no one's really talking unless you read like a legit like critic, but no one's talking about like camera angles and lighting and the depth of the screen and like what they're trying to capture from this angle and like what the scene itself is. But that's a major aspect. We talked at length about cinematography in video games in a previous episode of our show. So if you get a really good cinematographer or a group of them to help assist in making a video game, like maybe they could be a company that does contracted work, for various companies. Like maybe Santa Monica can hire this company of cinematographers to help shoot quote unquote God of War, or like Nintendo would hire a group of cinematographers to quote shoot Breath of the Wild 2 and all the other tropes that we have to talk about on the show every single week because we're 80-bit pod smash. So I think the framing and like setting the stage, what fits on the screen at any given time and what you want to communicate, especially when you get into like smaller screen forms, like the Nintendo Switch, for example, has a smaller screen. It's not 4K, and adapting titles to mobile devices or various streaming services that could be on various size TVs, and like being able to expertly place objects in a scene together in the right shot with the correct lighting makes sense and fits. I think, yeah, that's cinematography would do a really
agree,
good job.
because I mean cinematography is all about like staging and making sure that everything's in the right place, and that it's like it's similar to video games. It's creativity through the utilization of space. Obviously in cinematography it is camera space, and in video games it's a virtual space, but I think that those would go really like, yeah, I agree that if you had like a group of cinematographers that they got together, hired some programmers or whatever, or trained themselves in programming and made a video game, I think I would agree it would probably be pretty good. Similarly, I got two answers. I think that architects would probably also be really good at it, because architecture is one of those, similar to game design, architecture is one of those fields where it's highly technical and highly mathematic and highly like very engineering, while also being a very artistic medium as well, where a really people don't just hire architects to build houses. Anyone can hire a contractor, right? Any run of the mill contractor. You hire architects to build like a building for your bank that you want to be like a symbol of power on the New York skyline, because they have the ability to like artistically design that, right? So I think that architects would probably be really good at it as well for those reasons. And just, I mean, think about like I'm sure that they consult architects. Like I imagine there's probably like architect consultants out there that like help them design buildings in video games, right? Like that's got to be a thing, right? Like I don't know, that's a thought. But
yeah, one thing about architects is though, like a real life architect has to design a building with a limitation of physics on Earth, and like it has to bear weight and it has to function and all this stuff. With video games, you can just run wild because you don't have to worry about that at all. It's just a fake thing and exists in space. Now you do have to make it look realistic or convey the art style that the artist would have, but that's where like an architect's creative vision could really come to life, and it'd be really valuable to have that in video games. And there's got to be architectural like consultants that add their value to video games.
Well, but to that point too, like just on the realism spectrum, like their understanding of physics is astronomically high. So I imagine that like they'd have a really good physics physics engines and stuff like that
Mm-hmm.
that helped it out. So yeah, the other one, again, maybe it's a cop out answer because I said no games, but like toys.
Yeah.
There is sort of a close tie between the origin of toys and video games because of Nintendo, but again, I think that that link exists for a reason, because I think that people who make toys, there's already sort of this like natural bend towards making things cute and
Yep.
adorable and attractive visually, and to kind of push those dopamine buttons that are so great at manipulating children,
Yep.
but that also are so good at manipulating adults when put in the context of a video game. So those are my two
And that's
answers.
happened because Shigeru Miyamoto, Nintendo Mario Zelda creator, was making toys
Was he?
before
Yeah,
he
of course.
went
Yeah.
into
Well,
video
that
games.
makes
So there's
sense.
the
So,
mastermind right
yep.
there.
Word. Well, dang, it's no fun if it's already happened.
It did happen. Yep.
But
So maybe that you
all
just
right.
doesn't count. Scratch it.
Scratch it. Yeah, no, we're not talking about that. That didn't happen. I'll just cut it all out. No, I'm not gonna do that. But unless I need time, but we'll see.
Yep.
All right, cool. Well, that is DLC.
Meow, meow, meow,
We want
meow.
to hear what listeners think about that prompt. What do you think are some other professions that, based on just what they do, they got together with the skills to make video games? What would they make good games? And what would those fields be? We want to hear that from you. So Termite will tell you where you can share those thoughts if you have them.
If you want to interact with us, you can go to 80bitpodsmash.com, our landing website. There are links to all of our social media outlets, Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, Twitter, and you can tag us, add us. You can create your own discussion in Reddit and start your own thread and interact with the world in our space. We also have a Discord server. The link to that server is in all of our show notes. So 80bitpodsmash.com, click on a show, find the Discord link, and boom, there it is. And you can jump into our Discord server and interact with us there. And you can find us on all of our podcast platforms. Also, the list of acceptable ones is at 80bitpodsmash.com, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Google Play, Apple Podcasts. There's also the RSS feed that's there. You can throw into any third-party podcast app. So, and if we're not somewhere you want us to be, let us know, and I will do the work to put us on that platform. But no one has ever done that, so we're just hanging out where we are. You can get us every single week. Our new episodes launch midnights on Mondays.
Huzzah! All right. Well, that leads us to our main topic, which again is about games and game organizations that actually made a real world difference in some area or something in the world. We've got a bunch of different kind of like major examples, but we'll also talk about sort of some some general things that games do to make a real world difference. So
Yeah.
So, anyways, let's kind of set some boundaries then, though. What do for the sake of this discussion, what do we mean by positive real world difference? And I wrote these notes, so I'll at least share my take first. And I guess because again, like I kind of mentioned on the onset, there's sort of this there's all this sort of apologetics, one might say, around video games that are like, because there's been all this like debate and research done as to like the mental health and impact that video games have on the individual. And you'll find, you just do a quick Google search and you'll find like all kinds of different opinions about that from over the years. And the general consensus scientifically about, are video games good for the individual? The general consensus is maybe, and it kind of depends. And there's definitely a point at which it's detrimental and harmful to the individual, but it can have some good positive benefits too when done in moderation. You also have to look at the kind of bigger picture societally too and say like, are video games good for society? That's a different question, and it's a complicated one because you have all these sort of toxic communities that sprout up around video games and video gaming, and that is, it sucks, but it is a reality. Is there's a lot of negativity that comes out of gaming culture, that comes out of the gaming industry. I mean, look at we frequently talk about just all of the dysfunction in the gaming industry, crunch culture, harassment, and lawsuits happening, from Blizzard and Ubisoft, and just like there's so much bad and so much darkness that like.
And there's a lot of people in social media spheres that are doing death threats and hate crimes and all because something doesn't go their way in a company's decision for some reason that like makes people treat people like garbage on the internet.
Yeah,
Yep.
so it's it just sucks. So why we did this episode, because as much as we are very pro gaming here on this podcast, I would think, We rightly spend, I think, a lot of time criticizing the gaming industry too for those things we just described.
Hmm.
And yeah, and in many ways it deserves it. But the whole reason I want to do this episode is because I feel like there has to be some good, right? There has to be some, like, not just sort of a general sort of like, oh yeah, well, studies show that increases your mental health in these ways. Like, no, there's got to be some real positives coming out of the industry where it's like tangible, measurable, objective good that the video game industry and that the video game culture is doing.
Hmm.
So that's what we're doing here. That's what I mean by positive real world difference is not just
Yep.
like it's good for the individual, but like it can be good for society. And here are ways where it has been.
And like other artistic outlets, books, movies, and music, like video games also create positive things in the real world. They make
Yep.
real life differences. And so when you were exploring the question of like, do video games even make a real positive difference in the world? Well, it is a creative medium, it is an art form, but video games have evolved over the last 50 years since the 70s, right? That's 50 years ago. I
Yeah.
can't do math. And, at this point now we're starting to get real artistic realization through the indie movements. We're seeing different art styles. We're seeing deep storytelling and ridiculously meaningful stories and characters that we can relate to and change our perception and we can learn from and grow as individuals and as a society. And we're not really going to talk about that aspect of video gaming, although it's there. But when you're asking the general question of like, do video games even matter in this world? Well, they matter just now. Now they're getting to the point where they matter as much as books and movies and music because they're
They
getting
always mattered.
technological. Yeah, they always have been. But I mean, like you talk to lay people or people who aren't thinking about video games, but then you show them something like Last of Us Part 2 or Ghost of Tsushima or God of War, Death Stranding, like big, deep, emotional video games with hard stories that you have to deal with and struggle through. And it actually changes you and changes your perspective as a person. Like that's a thing that happens in video games now that definitely did not happen in the 70s with the
Sure.
same effect.
Yeah, no, and
Yeah,
and art is always valuable, and art of any
exactly.
kind, and any content for the most part does make the world a more beautiful and
Hmm.
valuable place. So that certainly is part of the discussion, and it will actually come back up, I think. So don't completely shelve that and say we're not going to talk about that because we might actually end up talking about it a little bit. But you're right,
Yeah.
it is sort of a facet of the positivity that it brings. But I want to get really specific, and I want to talk about actual times the video games, like, you can look and say the world's a better place because that thing happened. So
Yep.
cool. So before we jump into the specific examples, I'm going to tease you a little bit longer. I want to sort of give some sort of broad category examples of ways that video games can make a tangible impact. What kinds of things can games or game companies do to make a tangible impact? So these are going to be talking about broad categories, and then, like I said, we'll jump into some examples. But say that some of the ways that I've listed here are donations or giving to charity. Game companies can do that. Gamers themselves and gaming communities can do events or raise funds sort of from a grassroots level. I think of off the top of my head, Games Done Quick,
Hmm.
where they raise money and give to charity. And then like I said, big companies can also do stuff to raise money or
Yeah, and
donate
that's really
money as well.
accelerated over the last 5 to 10 years with
Hmm.
Twitch and like YouTube Live and the presence of influencers on Instagram and stuff. Like social media has kind of driven this donation charity streaming up to like the nth degree.
Yeah, for
One
sure.
example, I will say a specific example, is like when the Palestine tragedy was happening earlier this year. IGN like had it was a whole blow up and there's a lot of drama involved. But the gist of what I'm saying is when there was awareness made to it through the video game industry and those that follow it, there was a ton of players like you and I that saw or like that are interested in these influencers saw ways with which we could donate and make a difference to specific groups that were taking in Palestinian refugees, or as different things are happening in the world, we see an influencer who has millions of Twitch followers like do something to raise money that makes a meaningful difference in the world to that tragedy. And so that can happen in the gaming spaces. That's more of a cultural thing and not necessarily tied to a specific video game, but there's that.
Sure. No, it's kind of it's both. Also, you also can see, it's always best done when it's not, forced because of some controversy. But no matter what the motivation, you also see that coming from big video game companies too. They'll be like, hey, we're going to donate X to X amount of money to Y cause or whatever, or to Y charity, and that kind of thing happens and does make a good positive influence. Again, preferably it's done because they genuinely care about the issue as opposed to oh, we're just trying to save face or PR or whatever, or tax write-offs or whatever the other kind of, late stage capitalistic
Right.
justifications for those kind of things are. But nevertheless, it usually does, no matter what, it still usually makes a difference.
Hmm.
So the other thing, and this is kind of why I wanted you to shelve the art thing, is because video games, the games themselves can also raise awareness on issues. They
Yep.
can tackle things, deeper issues, deeper struggles that people have. Again, I think of Senua's Sacrifice, mental health, and sort of give people an insight into what life is like for those who suffer, and may do so in silence or may do so without a highlight on their lives. That's totally something video games do, and it can be done with the intentional design of the developers and stuff like that.
And the indie movement really tackles this,
Yeah.
raising awareness
Hmm.
for something that's not popular or something that's like what we would call hashtag hot take. Like a company is like Activision or Ubisoft, EA. They're not going to fund a game that's risky, or they're not going to fund a game that could like shed a bad light on
They
them
wouldn't
or
even
misrepresent the company's values.
they
But
wouldn't
an
even
indie
make a,
studio,
main Assassin's Creed character female without giving a male option as well.
right? I
It's
mean,
like,
like they're so lock and key to the market and to shareholders, and like making sure they're making money exponentially year over year, that they're not really tied down. I mean, they're making inroads. I mean, things are happening and evolving and changing, but
sure,
it's really the quality of independent studios, whether they're funded by EA or not, which they're doing. That's the thing. But the independent studios are the ones that can really share their artistic vision and put something out there that's quote risky. And because they're a small independent studio, they don't have to show that they're making money exponentially year over year and pleasing shareholders. They're just like, did we make a profit on this game? And sometimes a small studio of like 20 to 40 people, all they got to do is sell 50,000 copies and they're profitable. Like they've paid for it, it's done. They've, 50,000 times 60, you get the profits and you move on to the next game. Sometimes they don't. But, it does instead of having to sell 10 million plus copies in order to draw a profit on your AAA $200 million budget game like Destiny, you just have to put out something that, can reach a much
sure.
smaller audience and makes money, but it puts out really good awareness into the spaces. And the
Yep.
indie titles are doing that.
We don't see this very often in the video game industry, but I listed it here as something that video games are capable of doing. Whether they do or not, is a different story. But any piece of art, any work of art, is capable of developing a sort of call to action, where it's like, hey, like this is an issue. It's raising awareness, but it's beyond just raising awareness. It's also saying like you need to do something as an individual to change this. And again, I don't have a lot of examples, and I don't even know if there are any examples of this, but like that is something that any work of art can do. And video games are capable of doing them. They're capable of reaching, into someone's home and basically saying like, here's an issue that you should care about and need to care about.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a thing. Did you have any thoughts on that or any examples?
I do kind of want to highlight like Gone Home it's not really a call to action, but Gone Home really does show kind of the emotional depth of being someone on the outside as an LGBTQ individual in a world that doesn't really accept you, and like dealing with coming out and like what that emotion and what that weight is and how it is just to be someone just to be who you are in like the world. It offers a different perspective, and it might not be a call to action per se, but it's more like raising awareness or like shedding light on someone else's perspective. Like that's what you want.
Sure, and a call to action, I mean, I would argue could include like a call to examine oneself and
Yep.
change one's behavior, like.
Exactly where I was going with that. You
And
nailed it.
so yeah, I think that like, yeah, I would argue that a game like that really does get someone to say like, oh, how have I acted poorly towards others,
Yep.
now that I've sort of experienced this secondhand through this game. So yeah,
Hmm.
I would argue that's an exact example, because if as an artist, if you can convince someone to evaluate their actions and change those actions, I feel like that's the peak of artistry, right? Like that's the
Yep.
goal of any artist, is to be able to actually make a difference in someone's life and therefore make a difference in the world by getting someone to behave, better. So I would argue in many ways God of War is, kind of does that same thing, where it's not exactly the same, like, oh, you need to, you need to be nicer to people on the outside or whatever. That's not the lesson that God of War teaches, though. God of War teaches that it's like you need to, like, come to terms with your past mistakes so that you can be better. I really feel like
Hmm.
God of War does that same thing. But
Yeah.
so Cool. And that one's not quite as, I talked about how it's like, I want, talk about examples that are like measurable, and that one's not quite as measurable
Right.
as, like donation. Like you can actually literally, measure the numbers. But
Mm.
so nonprofit organizing is kind of another one. This one sort of happens outside of, this one's more kind of coming up from the gaming culture itself. But, these groups that kind of form in order to kind of make change, either of professionals in the industry who all get together and say, hey, we want to make a difference in this way or in this issue, or even grassroots stuff where it's like groups that are just like, hey, we want to get, groups of players are like, we want to get together. Again, it could be raising money, or it could be like, hey, we're going to go plant some trees or whatever, but we're organizing and creating organization in order to make a difference in the world, and we're centered around gaming. Like one of the thing that ties us together is gaming. So whether it's we all play games or we all make games, that kind of is a way that this industry and this culture make a difference.
Yeah, and a big example of that, you've probably heard it if you're at all in the gaming industry, is an organization, a nonprofit called Extra Life. And that's just one example, but they unites thousands of gamers around the world to play games in support of their local Children's Miracle Network hospital. Since its inception in 2008, Extra Life has raised over $87 million for sick and injured kids. So children's hospitals need support, and Extra Life is a giant nonprofit organization that sponsors all kind of live streams on Twitch and like various community gaming related events that raise money for Children's Miracle Network hospitals. So that's awesome.
And then my last category, I think, of ways that games can make tangible impacts, and we will have some examples of this in here. And it didn't immediately come to mind until you brought it up, actually, and then I literally added it to the notes.
Oh.
But very rarely, probably as rare as sort of calls to action in the video game industry, you get gameplay itself that is in some way impactful, gameplay itself that in some way changes people's lives or engages them in a way that gets them to make a difference in the world or make a difference in themselves. We'll talk about an example of this when we get to our examples, but we have a few. But yeah. So keep that in the back of your pocket there. It's something about the gameplay itself that is different and makes you better or makes the world better. So cool. Well, all right. Finally, we can get to the meat of this. Finally, we can stop teasing and talk about what are examples of companies, organizations, or communities in gaming that made a positive real-world difference. My very first example here, the thing that inspired this entire episode, is Ghost of Tsushima. Those who don't know, this happened back when the game came out. It happened sometime around last summer, 2020. There was a Ghost of Tsushima came out, and again, game about Japan, game about Tsushima Island. One of the things the game features is all these little shrines and gates and stuff like that where you can go that are actually based off of real world, like Shinto. Is it Shinto, Buddhist? I'm not quite sure what the religion is, but it's based off of real like shrines and religious temples on Tsushima Island. Well, one of those temples, I want to call it the Wata. Oh gosh, I'm gonna butcher this name. It's like the Watatsumi. Yeah, the Watatsumi
Shrine.
Torii Gate in Japan had actually been damaged in a recent tsunami. Not tsunami. Was tsunami or
tsunami
typhoon?
Typhoon number 10.
Typhoon. Okay, so typhoons are like the Pacific's version of hurricanes, and yeah, so it got damaged really badly. Gamers, Ghost of Tsushima fans found out about this, and they started a Kickstarter to repair the Watatsumi Gate because they had such a fondness for it from the game. So that, again, is sort of an example of like, oh yeah, this group of gamers got together, they discovered a love and a passion for something in the real world through a video game, and when they found out that something bad happened to that thing in the real world, they like got together, raised funds, and helped repair it. They literally, tangibly, you can go now, it's fixed, and more people can enjoy this piece of Japanese culture, and it's all thanks to Ghost of Tsushima.
Yeah, kind of to fill in some of the details that you glossed over a little bit. It doesn't really matter, but maybe December 24th, 2020 was when an article was written by GameRant.com about it. And so that was December when the events happened. September 7th of 2020 was when the typhoon hit. It was intense enough to shatter all records in predictions by the Japanese meteorological agency. And there was a special alert put out on September 2nd suggesting the typhoon would pose a, quote, serious, unprecedented, and imminent danger to human life. So following that storm, the Watatsumi Shrine priest organized a campaign on the crowdfunding site Campfire starting November 27th, asking for 5 million yen to repair the torii, a gate that acts as an entrance to a sacred ground of a Shinto shrine. So there's your religion, according to New York Times. The campaign was raised 20 million yen as of this writing, and Famitsu reports that Hirayama said lots of support was granted by Ghost of Tsushima fans. So
Awesome.
There's some of the more details. Yeah, this is great. Like, the Shinto shrine has historical relevance. It has cultural relevance through its spiritual connection to its people, through the Shinto religion. And people might think, oh, whoop-de-whoop, people donated 20 million yen to some shrine that doesn't help anyone from starving. It doesn't save anyone's life, or like there's a whole lot of other charities and things that money could go to that people think are poverty related and such, which are very valid concerns. But you don't want to just dismiss this as a waste of time or effort.
No, there's many
because
ways
it
to make the
does
world
matter.
a better place. Like,
Yep.
There's like and I would scoff at anybody who made that argument. Like, you can help people by like helping them preserve their history and honor their culture. And like, even if, again, Sucker Punch didn't set out to fix this, like it hadn't even been damaged when they made the game, obviously. Like,
right.
But what they did was they made a game that honored a culture and inspired people to really truly like appreciate this culture to the point where that inspiration ended up making a real world difference, and fixing something that was broken. Like, and that's beautiful. I think that's awesome. That's amazing. It's one of my favorite stories in the gaming industry.
It's really, really awesome and very impactful. There's a connection, like an ancestral identity that's preserved through this type of difference. And I often use the analogy of like the indigenous people or Native Americans, you would call, that were driven out of their land by colonists that formed America. Like, there's a language that one of the tribes spoke that there are only 9 people in the world today that still speak that language, and it's dying, obviously. So there are now younger folks who are trying to learn that language to continue to spread it, but it's endangered, and that is an endangered culture and an endangered identity. Those people, they have a lineage, they have a legacy, and it's erased from the history, it's erased from the world. And it's really, really cool when things like this happen. And so I use that analogy. Of course, that's a way more grave situation maybe than the Shinto shrine, but that just shows that I don't really know. I'm kind of ignorant, but the Shinto shrine itself is that there's this ancestral identity that's tying that people, that culture together in that area and that country. And it's wonderful to see a video game inspire someone to donate money out of their own wallet because they experienced the culture of themselves and said, hey, this matters, this is really cool, and I want to help make that a better thing. So they did it, and it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yep.
So speaking of things people have done that make a difference, especially a monetary difference in the world, we should absolutely 100% talk about Humble Bundle.
Yes.
Arguably, like, reading about Humble Bundle is like, oh man, we could dedicate an entire episode talking about Humble Bundle. But it has a place here too, so we'll try to give the sort of brief version. But Humble Bundle is it's basically a storefront of games where they have these little sales bundled packages of games, mostly indie titles. But the idea is, like, you buy the bundle for $15 or whatever. Quite frankly, you buy the bundle for a steal. In it's one of the better deals in gaming. And they're much of their sales, I'm not quite sure what the percentage is, and I would love to, let me see here. But the idea is that most of the sales go towards charity. So let me see here. The Humble Bundle supports a number of charities, including Action Against Hunger, Child's Play, the Electric Frontier Foundation, Charity Water, the American Red Cross, Water Aid, and the Wikimedia Foundation. By the end of October 2014, so it was founded in 2010, so 4 years later, participating developers had grossed more than $100 million, and by June 2019, the total charitable amount raised by all the bundles exceeds $150 million across 50 different charities.
Wow.
So yeah, like, I mean, they've raised a bunch of money for a bunch of really good charities. It is not it's been around for almost a decade. It's not a completely blameless. It has its fair share of criticisms and controversies, scandals, I guess. Nothing too crazy. I looked into it. Nothing like where it's like this is a silver bullet for this organization. Yeah. But there have been a couple of things related to like developer compensation and stuff like that. But for the most part, I mean, the kind of very basic idea of Humble Bundle was formed by a guy named Jeff Rosen from Wolfire Games. And he sort of described his inspiration coming from similar bundles of packages of games on Steam. So he noted that like these spread because of viral word of mouth. And then he also said that there was influence came from a pay what you want sale for a game called World of Goo. So there's also pay what you want sales on Humble Bundle, where you basically are
Hmm.
just like, you pay what you want for it and the money goes to charity. So if like
Yep.
some people will drop $1 on it because they are just trying to get a cheap game, but others might drop $50 because they're like, yeah, whatever, it'll go to charity. So it's a really cool organization. Really cool that they kind of got together and wanted to make a difference in the world and decided to do it by selling video games. So again, this is an example of like games themselves being used as a way to attract people to give to charity as opposed to just buying games
Hmm.
and fueling the capitalist march of progress.
Yeah, and it spreads a little farther than just like the consumer, like us. If we
Mm-hmm.
want to buy a Humble Bundle, we get to pay whatever we want, and we're listed to charities, and maybe you give a little more because the charity's on the list that you really care about or whatever. But
Mm-hmm.
what I want to highlight here is it's really cool to get the game developer studios and publishers involved in the process because they're donating those codes to Humble. They're the ones that are like sourcing this out. So Humble collects all of its games from various outlets that are on Steam, Ubisoft Connect, desktop app, GOG, which is good old games,
Mm-hmm.
and other platforms. Like there was a couple of PlayStation Humble Bundle ones over the years, and Sony's donating their games. Like here's a set of games, like you can have all these codes. The developer studios get paid for them, like they always would. Like they're selling those games, so Sony's grabbing them, and the bigger publishers are grabbing those titles, so the developers get paid, and then the publishers are kind of donating it's their way as a big corporation, big capitalist America can like donate into Humble Bundle. And then the consumers on our end are like, sweet, they, donated these games so that we can pay whatever we want for them and get them super, super cheap and also contribute to charity. So
Mm-hmm.
it works on like all facets. What I wanted to highlight. It's not just like a one way thing. It's everyone's involved.
Yeah, for sure. And then recently there was a whole thing about games, a bunch of people organizing to try to get games to get more serious about climate change. This comes
Mm.
from a site called dw.com because there was a whole like some kind of summit or something like that where a bunch of game publishers were there, and there was this whole like presentation I think about trying to get games to be more like focused on making a difference with climate change. And again, once again, sort of inspiring and writing these themes and ideas into their games to try to get people to be serious, take it seriously. But not just that, but also get people to do more about climate change. So I'm trying to see what the organization is, but hopefully we'll link off to the article and get more people interested. But
Mm-hmm.
so sorry, did you have any thoughts about that game? What
Yeah,
games are?
in the same way that like Ghost of Tsushima inspired gamers to care about a Japanese cultural icon. This company wants to create a video game called Beyond Blue. It's an adventure game based on the insights from real life marine scientists, and it's very much like getting gamers to care about the ocean to make people aware that this exists and this is a really cool thing and kind of raise awareness. It was inspired by BBC Blue Planet 2, the nature documentary, and it uses some footage from the British broadcaster. The game is designed to make players care about the marine world. So both Mirai
Mm-hmm.
is an animated protagonist in the game, and the deep she is exploring are based on insights from three real life experts active in the field of marine biology, oceanography, and ocean exploration. Eline Media is the U.S. game publisher and developer behind this game called Beyond Blue. And he said he wanted to create a strong protagonist who would serve as a role model for players to connect to and look up to. So I don't know where this game stands now, if it's like going to come out or what it's going to be on or what platform, but it is a video game that is trying to inspire environmental change and awareness for our oceans. So that's cool.
Yeah. This article also talks about a woman named Alenda Chang who wrote a book called Playing Nature: Ecology in Video Games. She talks about how games force us to interact with the system and they produce feelings. Players do things and can feel guilty because of their choices, or they can feel the flash of success when things work out in the game. So she talked about how that it can be used that capacity for video games to elicit those feelings can be used to try to get people to think more about ecological, environmental issues. She also talks about how like Gen Z, like things are starting to trend more and more towards ecological issues because it's a thing, something that Gen Z is very passionate about. And as they get older and their influence begins to kind of permeate the gaming industry more and more, that it'll become even more of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
So talk about the environmental experience can and appears to have already inspired players to become more active in their real lives. When American software developer Niantic, makers of Pokemon Go,
Yep.
called on players to collect waste on Earth Day in 2019, more than 17,000 people in 41 countries showed up, and together they picked up more than 145 tons of trash. So
There's your call to action example. Boom. There you
Yep,
go.
exactly.
Earth Day
Another
cleanup.
example of not just call to action, but also a tangible action that measurably made the world a better place.
Yep.
So yeah, there's a ton of examples of games being more focused on tackling environmental issues. And then again, this article further goes to talk about gaming waste, like electronic waste and stuff like that, that's generated by the gaming industry, and ways in which companies are trying to tackle reducing that.
Mm-hmm.
There's this crazy graph here that shows like how PC gaming just like is the as far as gaming platforms go, is just like a massive consumer of electricity, kind of waste and stuff like that. So it's kind of crazy
Mm-hmm.
there. So
There
anyways,
is a group of, in 2019, 21 companies, including Sony, Microsoft, Google, formed the Playing for the Planet Alliance, which was convened by the UN Environment Program to unlock the potential of gaming to tackle environmental issues. With the quote, "We want to inspire the gaming community to think what role they can play in tackling the climate crisis." Sam Barat, chief of the Youth Education and Advocacy Unit in the United Nations Environment Program, Ecosystems Division, and co-founder of the Alliance. That's a title. We also want to get the industry to hit net zero emissions as soon as possible. And I remember when the PS5 and the Xbox Series X were announced and talked about, their rest modes were talked about. I know like Microsoft specifically in Series X and S have a ridiculously low power rest mode, because in previous generations, even if the console was in its rest state, it was still consuming too much energy. And their goal was to significantly reduce the amount of energy that it consumes just being plugged in and sitting there. Yep.
Yeah, man, and I know, like, I'm gonna really quickly just sort of, by focusing on environmental, dedicating an entire section of this episode to environmental issues as well. I know that unfortunately that has to, I have to specify that I understand that's a controversial thing, that not everybody agrees in human-made climate change or whatever. But like, I'll step back and just sort of say, like, I don't care if you believe that or not. I think one thing that we could all agree on is that, like, people just trashing the planet's a bad thing. So we can
Yeah.
find ways to like clean things up and pick up trash and reduce pollution and reduce waste and make things run more efficiently and better and smarter. That only serves to benefit mankind, whether or not those actions are like contributing to, the warming or climate change of the planet,
Mm-hmm.
or
Which they
will,
are.
which they are. But
Scientific fact.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I I
Yep.
agree. I don't disagree, but there are people who do. So for those who disagree and might take ire at that and call us, leftist shills or whatever,
Right.
sure, fine, okay, whatever. Like, I will accept that there are differing opinions about that. But what we can all agree on, I think, is that, like, let's make the world cleaner at least.
Yep. Let's try to
Because
do something.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Let's clean things up at least. Maybe we can, and that only, again, the solutions and the innovations that come from trying to solve those problems only make the world and humankind flourish
Yep.
more. So that's just my thought on that.
And other ecosystems in the world that are non-humans, like all the
Yeah,
animals, and
yeah,
let's care about them too.
I
We're not
agree.
just doing it for ourselves. We're doing it to preserve like the whole world, like the
Mhm.
creation,
Yeah.
right?
So, and then the last piece of example I wanted to talk about, or sort of example slash category. There's sort of specific examples within the sort of category. When I had mentioned impactful gameplay, ways in which the gameplay itself can like make a difference. The biggest example of that, and the biggest sort of like kind of popular means by which games have done that, is through exercise, like games that have gameplay that get you up off your butt and doing things. So Ring Fit, Wii Fit, Pokemon Go, other kinds of exercise games that get people to get up and move. In fact, you linked an article about from IGN about how Ring Fit has actually like transformed people's health. So, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so Rebecca Valentine, who now works at IGN, published this article on the 22nd, yesterday, which was right in our research time discussing this topic.
Nice.
And so I was like, ooh, this is perfect. Rebecca Valentine documents a story of a lady named Jen who was in a rough space. She was told as a teenager that sports she wanted to play were just for boys. So she was already like told she can't do that stuff. And she had on and off relationship with fitness throughout the years. And she was self-conscious about her physical appearance, sleep deprivation, anxiety, and she was in the hospital being told she needed to have her gallbladder surgery, and she was terrified. So out of all of that, like, she was in a very, very place mentally, very, very low, and lost herself as a mom, was coming out of a major sleep deprivation because that's what happens when you have a baby, feeling down because of the hospital thing, and the way I had changed my diet. I couldn't eat this, that, and the other anymore. I had to give up fat and sugar for a bit, and I had a pit of anxiety. I was in a dark hole of anxiety, but I was doing Ring Fit. It was my routine. So it was Ring Fit that kept me going. Ring Fit has been the foundation of finding the rest of my confidence. Jen's story is unique in its severity. At the heart of it is a theme that I've heard again and again as I've spoken to 15 people who have completed Ring Fit Adventures campaign. So that was the point of the article, was to highlight people who have actually completed all of it, because apparently that's a pretty awesome feat since it came out 2 years ago. Everyone I talked to described a relationship with the fitness game that slowly but steadily transforms their relationships with health, fitness, and their own bodies. People with no fitness experience began working out and adopted new, healthier habits, and those existing workout routines learned more about their bodies, persisted through pandemic thanks to the game, or found new social groups to stay fit with. So those are examples of 15 people who have been thriving through Ring Fit, and allows them to be part of a community, have confidence in themselves. And imagine those 15 people, the impact that they can have in their communities, in their circles, and kind of the butterfly effect that stems out from that. Like that,
Sure.
video games did that.
Right. When we talk frequently about, again, I say we as in you and me, but also we as in the gaming community and the gaming industry, talk a lot about sort of either the mental health benefits or detriments of video games, but, very rarely do we talk about the potential physical benefits. And when we do talk about the sort of physical effects of video games, it's almost always it contributes to sedentary lifestyle, blah blah blah. It doesn't get people up and moving, so it's almost always negative. But like that's changing, and that has been changing since back in the mid 2000s when the Wii came out and made Wii Fit. And so yeah, there are black swans of examples out there of games that literally are not that. They are literally the entire way that you engage with the game is by getting up and moving. Pokemon Go, for all its faults, is another great example of a game that's like, hey, like the game forces you in some cases to get up and walk around.
Mm-hmm.
And that's awesome. Again, like it was just crazy when the game came out and everybody was out and about and they were playing games, but they were doing so in the world, engaging with it. It was drawing, again, it was great for businesses, or it was great for like museums and stuff and all these little places that like, they were starving for people to come out and do stuff. And then suddenly Pokemon Go, they made them a gym, or they made them a Pokestop, and people were suddenly coming by again and doing stuff. You know what I mean? And sometimes they were coming in and buying stuff, or sometimes they were coming in and like going to the museum to go like, oh hey, I've never been here before. This is cool. And so it's just like it's getting people up and out and about, and that's awesome. That's good. That's only beneficial. And again,
I had a coworker who would sprint between Pokemon stops as fast as he could.
Nice.
And that was how he kind of took the idea of Pokemon Go, and somewhere like in a downtown area that had a lot of stops, it was like, I'm just going to sprint between each one and just collect all the stuff as fast as I can. And he would do that. That was his workout. Like,
yeah,
that's what he did.
Anything that makes people's bodies healthier, makes them, staves off illness, it staves off sickness. Like, yeah, makes the world a better place on a large scale just because it's making people healthier. That's awesome. It's fighting heart disease and all the things that kill us.
And healthy people they have a more and better effect on others around them in their communities. It's about like, and not just helping an individual. I'm not doing this for me. Yes, you're self-caring, you're taking care of yourself, but it's so you can be a better person to who needs you. Like if it's family, if it's coworkers, you can show up for that other thing because you're healthy. And so just putting out stuff that makes people fit, makes people healthy, and enriches their lives has a trickle effect, a ripple effect of like affecting communities of people instead of just one person.
So I have an article from the National Library of Medicine and National Institute of Health that basically they did a study back in 2017 studying specifically Wii Fit, so a game that was already at that point like 10 years old, and they discovered basically that it has the potential from their research to really help people who are in rehabilitation. So the game itself is designed in such a way to be attractive and fun enough that like people who are trying to rehabilitate from some injury or illness are able to do so because the game motivates them to do so because it's a fun, enjoyable game. It's not just exercising. There's a sort of demoralizing sometimes. I mean, I have never been through a large amount of physical therapy. The closest thing I had was I had occupational therapy for my finger when I severed my tendon and had to get surgery on it a few years back. Well, that's a story I'm not sure I shared on the podcast, but nevertheless, I had to do these stupid finger exercises, and it felt so like, I know it was good for me. I knew it was important. I knew it was to help me heal, but it was just so like, ugh, like why do I have to keep doing this? And I imagine that's even larger scale when you're recovering from something like a serious leg injury or broken bone or whatever.
Oh,
And
yes.
but when you can make it a game and like pursue the game and have fun, then it can sort of take that aspect and that bite out of it. And so, yeah, that's sort of what they discovered, I think, and that's really cool. That's really awesome. A game has the potential to do that, and will be and can be used by physical therapists to help people, literally help people recover from injury. Really awesome. So, any thoughts on that, real quick, before we close out?
It is very, very not talked about. There's nothing out there about metrics gathering how video games affect the positive outcomes in the world in real life. And this one article you linked off to specifically is unique in that it does look at Wii Fit and its systemic effect on people. I wish there was more of that. Like, I wish there was more interest in, like, what is the socio-cultural effect on games coming out? Like, is it actually changing people in different ways? Is it raising awareness? Is it a medium that we can be leveraging and doing better with and being more responsible with as a society on both the consumption of and the production of video games? What messages are we putting out there and stuff? And I think there's a lot of good here that doesn't get talked about enough. And that's led to, it's a two-way street. Either the stigmatization of video games, that they're sedentary lifestyle and they're wasting their lives and they're always online and they're not even here in the real world. That has kind of led to a lack of interest in actually studying it. And also the lack of studying it has not produced enough positive evidence that video games are enriching to our society and to our culture. And so it's
or when you do get defense, like when there are defensive, when there are defenses of video games, like there's sort of a complacency even in the defensiveness where it's like no, we just focus on justifying that video games are fine and okay, as opposed to like actually sitting there and being like going the extra mile and saying, no, look at all the actual measurable good that games have done for the world. So yeah, I think that that's an important sort of next step in that apologetics of video games. But again, we shouldn't be doing good for the sake of proving that we're not bad.
right.
Like it's and I do think that a lot of these organizations, again, they're doing their thing, and they deserve praise and acclamation, but they shouldn't be motivated by just trying to be like, games are fine, see? So I do think that there's sort of an aspect of that needs to just continue to develop and elaborate. So that
Good
is it.
Segue.
Anyways, so that's the show. We want to hear what your thoughts are. What did you think of these stories? Are there other examples, things that we missed, glaringly obvious examples of games or game organizations that have made an impact and a difference in the world? We want to hear those thoughts. We want to hear your criticisms. We want to hear ways in which these stories, are there complicated things about Humble Bundle that we maybe are unaware of or didn't hit on in the research we did. So please, by all means, we want to hear, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And Termite will remind you where you can share your thoughts and where you can continue on the conversation.
Really quickly, 80bitpodsmash.com, 80bitpodsmash.com, our main website with all the information you need to care about, with all of our podcast platforms and social media outlets, places you can tag us, you can add us, you can start your own thread, you can communicate with our community, you can give us all of the feedbacks. Like us, share us, give us a review. Everything you guys and gals do on the internet regarding our content helps us bubble up and create more of a community, and we want to continue to cultivate that and grow us and y'all. So go check those websites out, and there's a myriad of ways in which you can reach out to us and talk to us through that place.
All right, well that is it. Next week we don't have an episode, although in 4 weeks it will be our Halloween episode, and we're going to be doing our monster smashes again. Another monster smash where we'll cover a specific monster.
Monster smash.
Yeah, so look forward to that, and but we will be back with another episode next week.
We will see you next week.